Hey, everybody, welcome back to another Post Status Live. And today is a special treat for me personally, but also I'm so delighted to share my good friend, Kristen Wright. We've known each other over a decade. I got to work with Kristen at iThemes, and she is a prolific journaler. She's written 2 books, and we've talked so much over the years about journaling, her passion for it. I journal as well quite often using Day One app from our good friends at Automatic. But I'm really excited for her to share her tips about journaling. Kristen is the author of The Transformation Year, a year-long email series with daily journal prompts. She's been keeping a daily or almost daily journal since 2014. She's published 2 books of her journals, Tell the Trail and A Tiny Existence. And by the way, those are on Amazon. I'll give links in the chat here in just a minute. And she is an incredibly brave human. She put a lot of that, Tell the Trail in particular, her first one is incredibly open. I would say maybe memoir almost of her, some really tough times in her life, and she shared this so openly and so brave and inspiring. But Kristen's been with iThemes since 2011, leading content, email, and product marketing. And as the founder of iThemes, I will tell you, numerous people helped build iThemes, but Kristen was a huge part of our growth. All that we did extremely well at iThemes over the years. She knows product inside and out. I've really been so delighted to be able to watch her career just take off to the next level. And but anyway, Kristen, thanks so much for being here today and sharing this passion of yours that is transformative truly for everyone. So I'll let you take over.
Wow, thanks, Corey. Well, I'm just so excited to be here, and I can't imagine getting to do it better than with Corey right by my side, helping me through a webinar. I get a little nervous on these things. So, but yeah, today I just kind of wanted to talk about 5 journaling techniques that will change your life. And I'm, going to do my best to take a look at the chat, but as I kind of jump into some stories and tips, if I miss something, we'll circle back to questions at the end of the webinar. So I did want to kick off with a story, and I call the story The Holly Bush. And in 2014, my husband and I had just moved into our first home, and it was a fixer-upper to say the least. But one of the things I really loved about the house was the backyard. It had really great landscaping and pink crepe myrtles and a couple of redbud trees, and there was a holly bush. So one weekend I went away to visit a friend, and my husband decided to do a little yard work. And it's kind of a joke between us because my husband doesn't do yard work. Like, we don't even own a lawnmower or anything, but for whatever reason, he decided to do some pruning. So when I got home that day, I found him in the backyard standing next to what used to be the holly bush. He had literally cut off all the limbs, and it was basically a stump. And the worst part was that the holly bush had actually been this really great privacy screen for this ugly, terrible, ancient gas meter in the middle of our backyard. We live in Oklahoma and have natural gas. And the way you get that utility into your house is by way of these metal bucket type things with dials and pipes on a pole. And one thing we failed to notice when we bought the house was that our gas meter was actually located in the middle of the backyard. It had just been hidden by this mature holly bush, so you really didn't notice it. So now my picturesque backyard had been totally ruined. And of course, he was very apologetic. He even admitted that the pruning got way out of hand. And he literally said, I got a little carried away. And I got really emotional about it. This is our new home, and the former owners had really cared for the yard. And I kept thinking how long the bush had been there and all the years it had taken to grow to that size and all the time it would now take to grow it back or plant something new. And in the meantime, we'd just be stuck looking at this gas meter. So that evening I wrote about it in my journal. And at the time I was really reckoning with how I respond to loss and change and how I tend to be really sensitive about those things. But also this concept of resiliency, that we have this ability to overcome challenges and bounce back. It's just a skill that we develop over time. So within a month, the holly bush was showing signs of life again. And for the next 6 years, as the holly bush continued to grow back, it was something that I mentioned in my journal every so often, just reporting in on its progress. And at one point, yes, I measured it. The bush had grown to be 7 feet tall. It was even bigger than when we first bought the house. So the holly bush truly did make a comeback up until 2020, when we had a week of sub-degree zero temperatures. Like it got down to negative 14 degrees or something, which never happens here. And the holly bush became this brittle, bare mass of dead limbs, and all the leaves died. And while it did technically survive, it needed to be pruned back again. But this time, my husband refused to touch it. So fast forward to a month ago, we actually had a gas leak, which meant we had to have an emergency gas line repair. And a part of that repair was that we had the choice of moving the gas meter onto the side of the back of the house where it should have been in the first place. So of course, we agreed to that option. So the workers show up and tell me there's a problem, the holly bush. It would need to be removed so they could access the meter and the pipes in the ground. And so from my office window where I'm sitting right now, I watched some workers with a mini excavator dig up the holly bush, roots and all, and take it away. And I remember thinking, I'm okay with this. I'm not really bothered by it now. Like the holly bush had definitely served its purpose, but it kind of struck me, that had I not written about the holly bush and all that it represented and meant, I may not have paused to recognize the enormity of the moment. It was a busy workday and I had a lot of things going on. Because I feel like I have this tendency to forget a lot of what happens in my life, especially on a daily basis. But journaling has really helped me stand witness to my life in a much more meaningful and intentional way. And it's allowed me to see all the ways I've grown and become more resilient to change and even loss. So that's why I'm saying keeping a journal will change your life. So what is journaling? When we talk about journaling, journaling is simply a personal record of experiences, occurrences, insights, and reflections kept on a regular basis. So, we can get into a lot of the different ways you can journal. Should you journal in a notebook? Should you journal on your computer? Should you use an app? And I just, circle back to this definition because it's nothing more than you finding a way to keep a personal record of what's going on in your life. And the amazing thing is that journaling has a ton of benefits, and these are actually backed by research and science. And we're working on a post with allcounseling.com and on my website, The Transformation Year, that shares all of the various studies. But these are some of the biggest ways that journaling can benefit you, right? I mean, everything from reducing anxiety to regulating emotion, strengthening memory. That's been a big one for me, is that I can literally remember things a lot more vividly and clearly because I wrote about it. And I also have this record, like I could go back and tell you exactly what I was doing on this day 6 years ago, right? Solving problems more efficiently. Sometimes I use journaling as a technique to write about a problem I'm facing, or like why, like what's really going on, like what's at the heart of the problem. Self-awareness, I think this is another big benefit of journaling too, that you really understand yourself better a lot more than maybe you would be had you not, sat down to write about it. Speeding up physical healing is one of the benefits I think is most interesting, because you wouldn't really think about journaling having an actual physical benefit, but it actually does. Like there was a really interesting study about people with chronic pain, and then also people who had injuries, that by journaling through their pain or journaling through the injury, they actually saw increased rates of physical healing. The rest of these two, I think I have definitely benefited from too. It's just like a boost to happiness and positivity, finding inspiration and being more creative, becoming more mindful. That's been a big one for me too, gaining self-confidence, and also the ability to set and achieve goals and track progress and growth. This is something too, especially that when I was writing the first book, or when I started really keeping a journal, I didn't realize it was going to turn into a book. But my goal of becoming a writer and publishing a book really became evident in my journals. And so it was something that is really cool to watch unfold in my journals, 2014 through 2016, as I was working on my first 2 books. So it's really cool. But when I talk about journaling on a personal level, this is what journaling has taught me. And, when I think about all of those amazing benefits that we actually have research and science to back up, this is what journaling has, taught me. And it's that there's really daily meaning and significance. And, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in just a bit, but I truly believe literally every day something meaningful or significant happens. We just have to be paying attention. And journaling is a way, I think, every day to take that pause to say, what happened today that was meaningful or significant? The next one is appreciation of the present moment. I had, really gotten into mindfulness, and that was kind of a revolutionary concept for me, several years ago, because I'm kind of one of those people that's always like camping out in the past or the present, past or the future. So really trying to be more present is a challenge for me, right? But I think as I started to learn that skill of, tuning into the present moment, I found I had a lot to write about because there was always something really interesting going on in the present moment, right? The next would be the sound of my own voice, that like, I think writing really taught me, kind of the way that I tend to approach, my life and some of my opinions or my values, even like a lot of that really started becoming really clear to me. And that's kind of funny, right? That like, we all think we know ourselves really well, but I think journaling actually lends itself to, just even this greater awareness of who you really are and what you believe in or what you value, right? And then the next would be themes, patterns, and symbols. And this is kind of why I circle back to the holly bush, that it became a symbol in my life. And I was able to reflect back on that just because it had truly become to mean something over the course of my life. And finally, two different stories. And this is a really interesting phenomenon, I think, when we, evaluate our memories of what's going on in our lives, or if we think about the past couple of years, we tend to focus on the negative, right? Like, and that is actually like a psychological phenomenon called negativity bias, that we tend to give more weight to the negative stuff that has happened than the positive. And my journal tells a totally different story though, because every day I'm focusing on what's meaningful or significant. And my journal tells this like amazing story of like how great my life has been and all of the amazing stuff that's happened. And it kind of provides the contrast I think I need to this like general feeling of like everything sucks or like it's not great, but it is, like it actually is. And my journal reminds me of that truth. So I will say though, with journaling, knowing how and what to write about is key. And I think that, when we think about, it's hard to keep a journal. And I'm going to say too, like I have a 2-year-old, and finding time to carve out and write in my journal is a challenge. And I think that's why, knowing exactly what's the best and effective way of journaling, or what should I write about, is kind of the key to success for learning and developing that journaling habit. So 5 journaling techniques to try. All right, the first one is expressive writing. And I'll say a lot of the research behind journaling and the power of journaling is really about expressive writing, okay? Expressive writing is a personal or emotional writing without regard to punctuation, verb agreement, or other technical aspects of writing. And I started with this one because I think a lot of times people get hung up on their writing being perfect in their journal. Like they want to create, perfect sentences or great paragraphs. But I think if you kind of remove all of those expectations or pressure on yourself that a journal has to be even like coherent at first, it kind of opens up this, wide open page for you to just write about whatever is going on, but you don't have to care. Like nobody else is going to read this, right? Like, there's a type of expressive writing called, stream of consciousness writing, where you're just kind of like writing literally whatever comes to mind. And, it's going to be run-on sentences. It's going to probably not make sense. But there's a lot of the research behind journaling is actually about expressive writing. I just, apply the research of expressive writing to journaling because that is essentially what journaling is. And so this quote by Barbara Kingsolver is one of my favorites, but it's all the noise in my brain. I clamp it to the page so it will be still. So this is the first journaling technique to try. It's just straight up, just express whatever's going on right now. Second, gratitude log. So this is something that I think most people are more familiar with when it comes to journaling, and it's gratitude journaling, right? Gratitude is the conscious act of recognizing what we are grateful for, acknowledging it, and appreciating it. So keeping a journal log or gratitude journal is a great way to write about what you're grateful for. So there is a ton of research around gratitude journaling. And I mean, there's, as the research progresses, there's some indication that like doing this every day isn't necessarily effective, but there is a ton of science behind the fact that like, just sitting down and acknowledging what you're grateful for has a transformative effect on your mental health and well-being. And so gratitude journaling is one of those things that, if you're not quite sure what to write about, this is an easy place to start too, because I think everyone can sit down and think of a handful of things that we're truly grateful for, right? This quote by William Arthur Ward, I love: gratitude can transform common days into Thanksgivings, turn routine jobs into joy, and change ordinary opportunities into blessings. So that's gratitude journaling. Okay, the third would be the day scan. And so this is kind of a journaling technique that I've developed, and it's kind of the way that I approach journaling every day. So it's a little bit similar to the mindfulness meditation, right, of the body scan. And so if you've done much, meditative work, you'll probably come across the body scan meditation. And this is just like a meditation that involves moving your awareness through each part of your body from the top of your head to your toes. And so it's actually, if you've never done it before, it's kind of an interesting thing to try, as maybe you've never paid attention to your eyebrows before, for example. But a day scan is a journaling technique that asks you to move through your memories of each part of your day, beginning in the morning, afternoon, and evening. And so sometimes when I sit down to write in the evenings, I tend to journal in the evenings, and I just kind of like run through what happened that day. But I think that process of like going by the morning, afternoon, and evening kind of like helps you remember everything that happened and gives you, the opportunity to write about what happened today. So this Mary Oliver, who's one of my favorite poets, said to pay attention. This is our endless and proper work. And I think this is one thing that's interesting about journaling, right? Is like, when you think about your day, sometimes a day can pass by and you're literally like, what happened today? Like, where did the day even go? And the day scan, I think, is a good way to remind yourself of all of those like maybe small moments that you might have otherwise moved past or forgotten without really giving much second thought to. Okay, number 4, meaning or significance. And so this technique is another one that I rely on a lot, because it just kind of comes naturally to me that every day I want to draw out something significant or meaningful that happened. And once you start attempting this, you'll really start to notice that there are tons of things that happen every day that you could write about as, something that was meaningful. And this quote by Dani Shapiro, another one of my favorite writers: perhaps I've come to see that life's greatest revelations are contained within the everyday. So every day something meaningful or significant happens. That's something I truly believe. We just have to be paying attention. And this journaling technique asks you to review your day or record something that had meaning or significance. 5, positive focus. Okay, so earlier I mentioned negativity bias, and this is something that I've become really fascinated with, because I never really first realized the phenomenon existed, because it's just kind of ingrained in us as humans. But second, that it had a name. And so when I got really more interested in psychology and going through therapy myself, this was something that kind of came out, that we have a tendency to focus on the negative, and this is called negativity bias. It shapes our everyday experience, especially if we don't make a conscious effort to give more attention to all the positives in our lives. So research does show that one negative experience carries so much weight that it takes 5 or more positive experiences to outweigh it. So when you think about that, it takes 5 positive experiences to outweigh one negative. So one thing I've, really started to do on a more intentional basis is, a day, may not have gone great, or something challenging or hard might have happened, but if I give my focus to the positive of that day, it does kind of help counteract it in a bit. So the positive focus journaling technique asks you to recall a positive experience, moment, or insight from your day and to write about it. So this quote by Alice Morse Earl: every day may not be good, but there's something good in every day. So next up, I thought I would include a bonus. And when I first, we talked about doing this webinar, I had 5 journaling techniques right off the top of my head, but I think there's really 6. And so I wanted to include this one. And this is just one that I call this present moment. And it literally asks you, when you sit down to write in your journal, to just like take a moment and observe the present moment and then write about it. And this to me is just such an anchoring and calming exercise, that literally we just sit down, take a look around and write about what's going on in this present moment. So orienting ourselves to the present moment takes a ton of practice. Like, I think we all know this. We must often use the same skill of observation to notice when our mind is either dwelling in the past or in the future. So journaling can be a way to help us be more mindful and more anchored in the present moment. So Anais Nin, another one of my favorite writers, said, "We write to taste life twice, in the moment and in retrospection." And so this is something this is one of my favorite quotes, especially when it comes to journaling, that it's made me more attuned to the present moment, because when I write about it again, when I write about it later, I get to like relive it all over again. I get to pull out all those details or things that happened that gives it even more meaning or significance, right? So I thought it would be fun if we take about 5 minutes and do some writing, right? Like, we're all here. I thought, maybe about 5 minutes. And these are journaling prompts that align with each of the techniques. And so if you want to take one, I thought, we'd take about 5 minutes to do some writing. And I've got this really cheesy egg timer that I'm going to set for 5 minutes. So Corey, I don't know if you want to hop in and say anything before we kick off.
I love the day scan, by the way. And you just framed it so well, because I'm the last person to reflect and review. And I'm like, okay, what's next? Tomorrow, next thing up. And I love that day scan in particular, because just there's so much good that does happen that I haven't, or otherwise that I don't process properly, because I'm just next thing. So yeah, and I love the holly bush story. I was thinking about the trees, next to the old office too. I was like, oh gosh, Jake, why'd you do that?
Yeah, everyone, there was some trees at our office at iThemes that had some unfortunate events, and we all, I think Patty and I both mourned the loss of those bushes or those trees, but they made a comeback too. So, okay, so I'm gonna pull over this little egg timer into my window here, and we'll get started. Okay. So we got about 5 minutes, and I'll hop back over here to the journaling prompts. If everybody wants to pick one out and do a little writing. Okay, we've got about 2 more minutes. Okay, final minute here. All right, just about to wrap up. I know 5 minutes is kind of a long time.
I I was thinking though it was so good because you what you did is give us time and space to reflect. And what it did for me, Kristen, was I sit here, I look outside. I'm in this conference room because I love the windows, the calming blue Oklahoma sky. We have a nice day today. Of course, it's hot, but um, that time and space just to kind of stop amidst the tornado
Mm.
and go, here's the things I'm thinking about. Here's the things I'm seeing. Here's the things swirling around in the tornado, and have a moment of just peace.
Mm.
So I really do thank you for that. It might have felt long at first, but it was exactly what I needed.
Good, good. I know, silence is uncomfortable sometimes. This is something I actually talked about, as I was planning this webinar. It's like, I want to give people a chance to write, but I know it means some silence, right? Which writing requires. So,
Well, what a refreshing thing, though, in our day and age. Like you
mm,
just mentioned some things going on in your life before we started, and it was like the world right now feels a little chaotic, but just going, okay, let's stop for a moment and just document all of that so we can see it and it's not just pinging around in our minds.
it's funny you say that. And there was actually a really interesting article I read recently about people who have kept journals through the pandemic and how journals actually become this like history, right? Like historians end up looking at journals as like what happened, what was daily life like. So we could all literally be keeping journals that historians will look at later. It's like, what was it like to live through the pandemic of 2020? Or like, what was it like to live through this time, when things felt, it was just an unprecedented time, right? So,
Well, and like over history, leaders, men, women of all shapes, sizes, races, cultures, religions, faiths have documented their mind. Now we get a glimpse into what was going on there. And this morning, it's so interesting you said that too. I keep my journal in day one, by our friends at Automatic, WordPress VIP, and others as a sponsor here at Post Status. Got to give a little plug to our friends there. But I had 13 entries, Kristen, from
mm,
today. And one of them was we were 6 years ago today, we were in Montreal with
mm,
our aunt, mother-in-law, and grandmother-in-law. And it made me smile. And I wouldn't have thought about that, had it not, I had not recorded that 6 years ago. And now I got to taste a little bit of that happiness and glee.
Yep. I love it. That's awesome, Corey. That is so great. Well, okay, so that does bring me the question, and this is a challenge I want to pose to everybody is what if you kept a journal for a year? And I think that, a lot of us are, maybe you haven't dipped a toe into journaling, maybe you're kind of curious, maybe you have over the course of your life, but I think what would happen if you kept a journal for a year? And I mean, today could be the first day, right? Like today could be day one, and maybe day one is the app that you choose to use. But this is a challenge that I want to like kind of kick off to everybody. And I did, yeah. Do we have any questions or comments so far?
I asked, I'd love to hear you all, Kristen and I would both love to hear you all's experiences too. If you want to put those in the chat, you can share how it went. And I'll lift those up for Kristen as you do.
Oh yeah, I just saw the chat. Hey Kelly, I'm so glad you're here. Awesome.
I just put a link to
Yeah.
the transformationyear.com back there.
So yeah, I did just want to go ahead and say, like, I've got this free resource that I've been developing called the Transformation Year. And it's a year-long email series with a daily journal prompt. And so, I think a lot of people, the thing that I hear all the time about people who want to journal but have a hard time is like, well, what do I write about? And so the Transformation Year will get delivered right to your inbox every day, a daily prompt, a quote. There's actually 3 different prompts based on the techniques I mentioned here. There's a gratitude focus, a mindful moment, and expressive writing prompt. And so you can choose the one that you want, but there's kind of a quote to get you kicked off. And that's the way I've kind of, journaled in my life is like, I always start with a quote for some reason. Like I'll hear something or read something that day that I want to start with a quote, or that kind of gets me into the mindset that I need to be in to write. And so this is a transformation year. So if you, want to have this in your inbox every day, you can sign up for free at the Transformation Year. So that's all I've got, Corey. So I don't know if we want to talk any more or if there's any questions.
I would say there was so much here for us to think about and reflect on. And that to say in 30 minutes, there's a lot here. But I love your challenge of what if you did it for a year, and what if you provided an amazing guide for that, the prompt. So if you struggle to think, well, the blank, notepad or the day one app or whatever app or way you do this is daunting, you've given everybody this amazingly thoughtful, thought out prompts to do so. But like you've also given us frameworks to say, like Kelly says here, I love the day scan, used it to start a note to my son. Sometimes I want to connect with him, but not sure what to write. So on that note, Kristen, and thank you, Kelly, for sharing. Kelly, a dear friend of ours and also our coach, mutual coach. I have friends, Kelly, who are writing journals to their children. That's when I need to start, Kristen, because if you're like me, I've wanted to ask my parents, what was going on when you were my age or when you were a kid, and I just recently asked both my parents. I said, I'd love to talk about your childhood. My son is so great at that. He's a great prompt. He's like, so Daddy, what'd you want to be when you grew up? I was like, well, the first job was truck driver. He would never have known that, but why? I think that's tremendously compelling. So I love that you're writing something to your son. Kelly says also, Kristen, I bet if I journaled for a year, I would emerge a much more grounded person. Yes, and Kelly keeps one for her grandsons. Oh, that's special.
That's so great. Yeah, I'll say like journaling is taking on a new meaning for me since I've had my son too, because I get to write about like the first time he saw a shadow, right? Like that was a moment that I was like, this is just adorable, right? But like now he's got this record of like what he did the first time he saw a shadow, or the first time he tried to skip, or lately he's been like really into saying all his colors. Like he wants to say all of the colors, but that was kind of like his first jumpstart into language really was the colors. And that's something I think it'll be a gift to him later to be able to say like, this is what you were like as a toddler, like, because I don't think all of us have that, right? Like we don't always know like, what were we like? And so I think that's a great idea, keeping it for kids and grandkids.
And just, the highs and lows at life that sometimes they don't understand now. Oh, that makes sense.
Mm,
That's why daddy or mommy felt stressed out. And,
mm,
as kids, we internalize everything. It's about us and we think it's our fault or whatever it is. But to go, oh, now I get it. I think that can be generational healing in some ways too,
wow.
and empowering.
That's good.
So, Kristen, my question for you is paper or digital? Which one do you prefer?
Well, I'm probably going to surprise people because I'm all digital. And I think it's because I'm on my computer. I work in tech, obviously. So it's just a lot more natural and fast for me to type. And I think I'm well aware, though, of the research that says that physically writing has a lot of benefits, right? Like there's this like more of a mind body connection that happens when you physically write. I just don't have the patience for it, frankly. Like I just don't have the patience because my mind works faster than my hand can write. So typing has just been a better way for me to express myself. And I'll say I use the Simple Note app, and that is another one that Automatic owns.
Right.
It's a really, yeah, it's funny. It's a really simple, clean, plain text note taking app, and it's searchable too. So I can literally search like June 16th, and I can look at like literally everything that happened over the past couple of years on June 16th if I wanted, And actually, as I was preparing for this, I went through and read everything I'd written about the holly bush, just as kind of like as my way to reflect. And so I could search my journals for that key term, and everything I'd written about it could pop up. And that was a really interesting exercise, like just to go back and see like the times the holly bush had come up in my journal, like what was going on. And now today to get to share it in this was like kind of a culmination of all of that, right? That I got to use it as a symbol, as like talking about, my passion of journaling. So
if you have questions for Kristen, please put those in the chat and I'll lift those up and share those with her. But Kristen, in the meantime, I want to ask, because I remember we were working together, and I knew you were building up to this thing that would initially become Tell the Trail. So as a way to illustrate how this has worked in your own life and why you're passionate about it, would you tell us, like, so did that start out, just journaling some of those thoughts, and then how did that all process come to be, okay, I will put it in book form and share it with the world?
It was a really interesting time in my life. Like when I first started journaling, it came out of therapy, that like my therapist kind of recommended that I start writing. And, I went to art school. Like I've always been, consider myself an artist or designer or whatever. And then the writing part of myself wasn't like a part of my exploration that I'd ever really explored, not seriously. And so my therapist was the one who introduced me into mindfulness. And this was, kind of a way to alleviate anxiety and stress in my life. It's like, let's, start practicing some mindfulness. And it really did blow my mind at the time. Like I had never oriented myself to the present. And so when I started doing that, I realized I had a lot to write about because there was a lot going on a daily basis, that it just kind of lended itself to writing, keeping a journal. And so I don't know, I'm kind of the type of person who I develop these habits, like they're almost like OCD habits, just that I need to do it every day. And so that's kind of what journaling became, is I started like challenging myself, like I'm going to write every day for 6 months in my journal. And I realized every day I was writing 1,000 to 1,500 words in my journal every day. And I felt like it was like important, and I mean, I guess it's funny because I look back and I think, oh, why did I publish those journals? But I was really, struggling with my value of authenticity and vulnerability, right? Those are two values that I think are important they're important for connection, but, important for growth too. And I just started thinking, like, I think other people could be going through the same things that I'm going through too. And so maybe these journals are going to help other people think like, I'm not alone, or there are other people that struggle with feeling like they're lost, or they're not really living their full lives, their lives completely, or their lives are just kind of passing them by. And that was kind of that feeling that I really started feeling kind of late into my 20s, was just like, I feel like my life has passed me by and I'm only 29 or whatever. And I need to start like paying more attention. And this was actually the year I turned 30, was the year that I started journaling every day, because I was like, I've decided to start paying attention to my life. And my journal was the way to pay attention to my life.
Mm. Yeah, a couple of things stood out to me is life passing me by, and
Mm-hmm.
that's my one of my challenges is I think in an increasingly busy life, um, it's so easy to go, yesterday's gone, it's out, it's forever, but not to record and document. And I think there's another level to this, expression.
Mm.
Most of my things live here, and sometimes it feels, Kristen, like a ricocheting. And I'm like, I used to publish blog posts quite regularly in the
Mm-hmm.
past, and for probably the last couple of years, it's felt like I'm not expressing myself, and I want to express myself, and it doesn't need to be a blog post or public. And so, just knowing you were writing like 1,500 words, I think that is incredibly mindful to go back and review the day, like someone else said too. Love the day scan, and just say these things were happening now, because
Mm-hmm.
my view of my past, or whatever happened a moment ago, you know it just taking that time and understanding, like, I have selective memory sometimes. But I remember you telling me one time, and well, you just talked about it with the holly bush. I go back to understand, maybe today I think, oh, this emotion about it. When I read it, you told me this one time. You went back, reread an experience, and you go, that's not actually true what I was thinking. This is what I was thinking back there. And it helps us to remember better that of the things that go on in our lives.
Yeah, totally. I totally. And I mean, I think that's something I realized too, that I mean, and I'll be honest, like I haven't been journaling as much as I would like to be recently, just because, having a toddler, it's just, there's a lot less time now, and I do think about that sometimes. Back when I was journaling, I had a lot more time on my hands, but those years are just so vivid to me because I was writing, I was journaling. And anytime I go back and review some of those things, I'll be like, gosh, I forgot. Or, maybe my memory of it doesn't really reflect like what I actually wrote about it. And, or I'll get this, I'll forget all of like the enormity of everything I've gotten to experience. Like I've, gotten to do some traveling, and I would write a lot about, where I went. If I had another life, I maybe should have been a travel writer or something, but I love getting to write about places I've gone to. And sometimes it's just like being able to review that, or just I just get this like so much gratitude for the fact that like I got to experience that, or I got to like go hike a glacier, or spend some time in the redwoods, or get to walk a beach or whatever, that like it makes me a more content person, I think, overall, just being able to like go back and review all of those experiences that even going back through my photo album doesn't really lend itself to the same type of reflection or gratitude or whatever, that it does getting to read my journal about it.
Yeah, you said mindful and mindfulness, I think, and specifically how you got started was through your therapist. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember us talking about around the time of Tell the Trail, and I was like, you would share some of the thoughts, and I go, okay, I was trying to understand, how is that valuable to me as a person? What is the value to say, okay, I'm looking out in this conference room and all that, but back when you said mindfulness, I've now become much more aware of this powerful thing called mindfulness. What we have in this moment, in the moments we've lived, um, have this immense value to just stop for a second. Too often, I'm not in the present. I'm in the future that
Mm-hmm.
could or could not happen. Worry, dreams, whatever it is, to recognize in the moment. I don't know if I would have stopped and gone, did you remember, Corey, how beautiful the sky was today?
Mm-hmm.
I probably would have not just taken a moment to go, hold on a minute. If there's anything I can be grateful for today, one thing is inspiration on looking out the window into that blue sky. And the immense value for our lives, that each moment is priceless and gone, you know.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'll say like one of the ironic things about, this orientation to the present moment is like our ability to think into the future or to plan or to even reflect on the past. Like that's one of our unique qualities as humans, right? Like we're able to do that. And so it's kind of interesting that like we also need the self-awareness to say like, yes, I have the ability to project into the future, or to make plans or to hope and to dream, but I need to balance that with like staying in the present moment, that like you can't live in the future all the time or the past. Like, for me, the greatest, and it's challenging, it's a challenge every single day to just like be here, be now, like right now. So
one thing I'm learning currently is savoring, and I think this is stop, detail it, savor that moment. It can last longer. You can come back to it, and that moments of joy and happiness and peace, and we can go back, like we talked about reviewing some of our journals, that and relive some of those and go, gosh, and that ticks the box, that on that happiness thing. And I think it leads to gratefulness. Oh my gosh, thank you for the moments that Chris and I shared together. Thank you for the trip, however, if you believe in a higher power or whatever else, or just the universe or nothing, it's like that, being grateful and savoring that moment. And the opposite that I've really been trying to learn, life has been a good teacher, is pain. And I know through Tell the Trail, that whole thing began around some incredibly painful moments in your life. And the thing that I read in a book called Refuge Recovery is meet your pain with compassion. And I thought, well, when my back hurts, it's something I'm learning, is to be compassionate for it. I see you, I feel you. And to meet that, but to journal that and put that out, it's like, I feel you, pain. You're like, if it's in my back, whatever it is, I see you and I hear you and I meet you with love and compassion. It comes back to self-love, self-worth, and not running. What I typically do is run from emotions. And I think, Kristen, journaling is that incredible, in between those therapy sessions, which I highly recommend for everybody. I have mine at Friday at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. is my standing appointment. Helps, this practice that you've been sharing about journaling helps us to develop that practice.
Yeah, and I mean, if I needed to close on one note, it's just that there's another quote by Joan Didion that I love. She recently passed away. She's a really famous writer, but she said, "I don't know what I think until I write about it." And that has happened so many times for me, right? That I've kind of got this like vague feeling, or I've stressed about something, or something's bothering me. But when I sit down to write about it, I like end up at this conclusion that I would not have arrived at had I not sat down to write about it. And I think even this past week was a wild ride. We're, looking at buying a house, which I do not recommend at the moment. Like, it is not a good time to buy a house. But having to just kind of wrestle with the process, and, how I can really idealize, a home especially is like where you build a life, right? Like it's, where your family exists, where you make memories, and, just having to like kind of figure out what was at the heart of my like urgency or need to like, for like this house specifically that we really wanted, and it doesn't look like we're going to get, just, what was so special about this house? Like, what am I really trying to get at? And it's the fact that like, I really want a place for, my kids to grow up and feel cozy by the fireplace, or get to jump in the pool in the summers, or get to climb the trees in the backyard, or I get to have good friends over and have dinner parties or whatever, that like, that's really what I'm longing for. Like, that's really what I want, is this like connection and this place of like safety. It's not like specific to one's house, right? But I needed that time to reflect on like what's really going on here, like and I don't know, I mean, therapy probably could have helped me if we talked about it, but I could do it on my own with journaling. I could sit down and think like, I'm going to write about this and see where I arrive.
And I think most therapists would say that's amazing pre-work and post-work for the therapy
Exactly.
session.
Hmm.
You know, therapist is there to guide you for the moment, but there's pre-work, post-work that you can capture, savor, expand, review, come back in a year. Like we're talking about these, if you're doing a digital or however you do it with paper, come back and go, oh, I know you and I both had these experiences where we go back and we see our understanding at that moment, but then years later we come back and
Mm.
we have a new thing, new perspective to add to the moment, and it feels like, I don't know, it makes sense. That's what I think I'm trying to do in the world, is make sense of it all,
Mm.
make sense of what's going on in here and out here in the world. And journaling is an amazing way to help do that. Kristen, anything else you want to share before we wrap this up and let you get on to the good work you do over at iThemes and Savoring UP?
Well, thanks so much, for this opportunity. It was a good exercise for me to put the work into preparing this and to kind of think through. This is all stuff that I had never actually organized before. And so who knows, maybe this will end up in another book or something. I don't know, as a jumping off point for a new book about journaling. But I just truly hope that journaling, if you don't journal already, for those that are on the call, I just really hope you'll give it a chance. Like I do think that, like, putting the work into it, putting the time into it, and I'll say the research shows just 15 minutes a day. That's all you got to do is 15 minutes. And a lot of us waste 15 minutes a day scrolling through Twitter or whatever. But like, putting that time into this is going to yield so much reward. And I would love to think that I helped inspire that in someone, or just being able to share what it's meant in my life. So
That's a perfect segue to say now you need to go sign up for the transformationyear.com, these daily updates, and you have this amazing guide in person and human in the world, Kristen Wright, who has done all this work to help guide you. You don't have to do this alone or sit there with a blank page or pixels or whatever it is to do this. So go right now, sign up for the transformationyear.com. Kristen Wright, thank you, my friend, for sharing this passion of yours and how to think about it and use it as a tool
mm,
to enrich and benefit our lives.
thank you. Thanks, Corey. This was awesome.
Thanks, everybody, for being here at Post Status and showing up. And I hope you'll share some notes. By the way, Kristen happens to be in Post Status, so you can share things directly to her. You can share it in club that you've got some great things from today and that you started your journaling practice or expanded it and grown it. But thanks again, Kristen. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you next time.